Hello, everybody. Be right back.
Oh, hi.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Trek. Leave me holding the ball. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the pre-Geek News Reviews and Opinions live stream. I am Shadow Lizard 3000. Of course, we do these live on YouTube just for you guys, even though I don't know what to say. I'm not very good at hosting my own live streams, yet some reason I always have a desire, a craving, if you will, to stream. But I never do because I lose my nerve. But anyway, how's everybody out there in the wonderful YouTube interwebs and Googles and whatnot doing this fine evening? We got the top 40 hits for you played all night long.
We've got the top 40 hits. I am Casey Kasem, and I'm just going to go ahead and ramble on about the various anime that I have no idea about. Because that's what I do. I'm Casey Kasem. All I know is music. All right. How's everybody doing? Happy Friday. Let's go ahead.
13th.
What was that?
It's Friday the 13th.
It is. I'm not going to lie. I'm actually kind of worried about that because I think the last Friday the 13th, we had tons of problems.
Who knows? Just watch out for Jason. Watch out for Jason, whether he's a machete-wielding hockey mask-wearing killer or a bear.
I have a friend named Jason, but he doesn't like hockey masks. Is that okay?
That's fine.
All right, all right.
Is he a bear?
So what was that?
Is he a bear by chance?
If he's a bear, then he's an extremely skinny bear.
Okay.
I would actually say that bear is malnourished, and PETA should do something about that. This ought to put things into perspective because I'm not calling Alex out, but he's thinner than you, Alex, and he's about your height.
Okay.
So, yeah, he's the one that's like your sister, and I'm super jealous of. It's like he literally eats something and then he can burn through it like nothing. It like he doesn't gain a pound, and I've seen him eat like tons and tons of candy, and he's never gained a damn pound.
Right.
So stupid. But anyway, welcome to the pre-show, everybody. So we actually do have a couple of stories that we need to approach, and for our buddies, or at least some of our fellow listeners of the anime community, we actually have a couple of anime-based ones in the pre-show that we need to address.
Ooh.
So are you ready to do that, Alex?
Let's do it.
The first one we're going to do was actually suggested by Stephen Romney, but somebody actually did ask if he knew. So we're going to go ahead and do this, even though Romney isn't here. We'll get his opinions when he gets here. But it looks like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Diamond is Unbreakable is coming to Toonami. Now, I think JoJo has already been on Toonami, so this is basically like a new series of JoJo, right?
I know. What's it called again?
Speaking of Stephen Romney, he could actually answer this for us. So, Stephen Romney, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Diamond is Unbreakable coming to Toonami. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's not that big of a surprise given that they've been airing the JoJo anime on Toonami for the past while. And it makes sense, given that they're coming up on the end of Part 3, that they would then move on to Part 4. I'm not too sure how to feel about how the English dub is going to be presented, since the dub has been pretty hit or miss. For the first season, some characters, they got spot on, like Speedwagon. Others, not so much, such as Johnny Young Bosch as Jonathan Joestar. But in their defense, Jonathan Joestar is meant to be a straight-laced, like, typical hero protagonist, so of course they're going to cast Johnny Young Bosch. I mean, it just makes sense. It's just, I love him, but the guy can't do a good British accent. I mean, he tries. He really does.
Oh, is he supposed to do an accent for it? Oh, he's doomed.
Well, that's for Part 1, for Season 1, so that's already in the can. But then things got weird for Part 3, which is Season 2. Try wrapping your head around that.
Before people jump down my throats, guys, I love Johnny Young Bosch. I love him, but he's struggled always. Like whenever you hear him in a minor role doing some kind of an accent, he struggles with it. And so I'm not necessarily saying that the series is dead in the water. I'm saying that it's going to be a very long transition before he can get to something resembling what he needs to sound like. Okay.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, I'm going to give him credit. He works hard and he works off hours to make sure he can get it, but it takes him a while.
Yeah. Plus that was for Season 1. So for Part 1 of Season 1, because season 1 did parts 1 and 2. Season 2 and then season 3 were part 3, Stardust Crusaders, and the dub team even explained in various press releases saying, hey, yeah, accents were kind of hard during some of the action scenes, so for part 3 we're not going to do accents to take it easier on the voice actors. And I'm torn. Again, some voices, like the voice for Joseph Joestar, old Joseph, work. Polnareff, not so much. So I'm willing to withhold judgment on the English dub of Diamond is Unbreakable until I actually hear the characters. Now, with Diamond is Unbreakable, you can get away with there being no accents because, unlike Stardust Crusaders,
sorry to interrupt again, but who's playing Dio Brando? I'm just curious.
Let me look that up. Given that once part 3 wraps, that'll be the last of Dio Brando. So let me take.
I'm at least interested in that one because. Well, mostly because of stuff you've told me about Dio Brando, but at the same time, like, he just looks like I could honestly see like 2 or 3 people playing him, and so I want to know if one of mine is right.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find where the credit list is, because I know that they kept it consistent between the dub for Phantom Blood and the dub for Stardust Crusaders because they'd be stupid not to. And the voice they had for Dio is one of the good ones, where the character's spot on. But again, Dio is not that hard of a character to actually do. He's very much, I mean, even so much so that the fact that the voice actor in Japan often plays villains, it was very much a case that they see Dio Brando and just like, of course you're going to get Koyasu Takahito to play him. He plays every villain in every shonen anime ever.
Well, that actually confirms another question that I had for you, because somebody was actually telling me that Ryusei Nakao played Dio Brando, and considering that he is the Japanese Frieza, and I love the Japanese Frieza, that's a wonderful fit, but I don't think that's the right voice.
No, it wasn't Ryusei Nakao. It was Koyasu Takahito for both part 1 and part 3.
Okay.
And I know that for a fact because that, again, with voice acting continuity, I mean, there are some exceptions, but for the most part, they try to keep things very consistent with voice actors. The only exception to this has been with Berserk, but that's a very bizarre exception, just given how long it was between the first anime and the Golden Age arc movies. All right, so let me look.
People are off doing other jobs. There's no way you were going to get the original cast to come back.
All right, so looking here, so for Dio Brando, I'm trying to find the English dub, but it's a problem with IMDb. They make it hard. Patrick Sates, I think, is...
Yeah, Patrick Sates was the Dio in the previous, so there's a good chance he'll be back.
Okay.
Yeah, so you'll definitely have him back. And so, as to kind of get back to my initial point before we took this little detour, unlike Stardust Crusaders, where the main characters are traveling around the world and accents are expected, Diamond is Unbreakable stays wholly contained in Morio. So doing no accents actually makes sense for part 4 than it did for part 3, because there it's a case where, oh, well, it's basically one small city in Japan, so naturally they would all kind of sound the same. And so no accents for that part actually makes sense. I'm just worried about how they're going to approach certain characters. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, the one I'm most worried about is how they're going to approach is Kishibe Rohan, who is basically the author insert proxy for Hirohiko Araki. And it's the case with dubbing, you could go different directions. I guess, I don't know how to feel. But I hope they at least get Richard Epcar back as old Joseph Joestar, because that is spot on casting.
Yeah. So there you go. There's Romney's thoughts. Alex, what's your take on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Diamond is Unbreakable coming to Toonami?
I haven't watched any JoJo's, so I have no opinion.
I'm excited. I'm at least happy that but I said this before, like, I want to watch JoJo, but I've kind of admitted to Romney, like, I would really like a dub for it because I want to be able to understand what's going on. And so I'm very glad it's getting it's got a dub, and there's a good amount of it already out so that I can go and enjoy it.
Yeah. And honestly, if there was ever a good jumping on point for you, I mean, in order to understand part 3, you'd have to start from the very beginning. Whereas if you want to wait until they start airing the episodes of part 4 actually gives you a really good jumping on point if you haven't seen the previous 3, because parts 1 through 3, it's a one overarching story, whereas part 4 is kind of like the new story. It's a case of, okay, that previous story is done. here's a new starting point. It's a very good entry point if you want to get into JoJo but don't want to watch or go through the first 3 parts, because it's a bit of a slog, and some of the parts haven't aged as well. Part 4, if you're into JoJo but don't want to watch the first few seasons, Part 4 is a really good jumping on point.
Okay. So moving into the next story that didn't make the cut, again, it's another anime story, and this one, wow, a few of you guys actually wanted to make sure, did you see it? Did you see it? Did you see it? Did you see it? Yes, I did. So there is a Gundam live action movie coming soon. I believe it's going to be a Japanese studio partnering with Sunrise to be able to get it out. Unlike
Sunrise is partnering with Legendary. That's the story.
Yes, it's partnering. That's right. It was with Legendary. So people wanted to know my thoughts as well as the panels on a Mobile Suit Gundam live action movie. I've already kind of given my thoughts off camera to Alex, which is I'm skeptical at best. Don't get me wrong. I like the Gundam reference in Ready Player One. I'm happy about Pacific Rim being as enjoyable as they are for me, being a mecha fan. But Gundam has done it before, and that movie wasn't very good. So at that, I know a few people are going to get mad at me about that, but I've seen G Savior. It's not that good, and that was Canadian. A Canadian studio trying to do it. Okay. And after watching that, I was kind of thoroughly convinced. I don't know if you can do things like Macross or anything involving a giant robot until Pacific Rim did it. So at this point, I'm cautiously optimistic. I want a trailer before I make a final assessment, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's way too early to be making any judgments, because we know the studios, but we don't know who's writing the script. We don't know who's directing it. We don't know whether
before people jump down my throat, Legendary has had duds. Okay. Legendary's had great movies. Legendary's also had duds.
Yeah, especially when you also consider that Pacific Rim Uprising didn't perform that well at the box office. And that's although I know Adam himself enjoyed it, that also can affect a company's track record, that even if you make a good film, if it doesn't make its money back, it doesn't look so good. I mean, look at Platinum Games, for example. They make really good games, but they haven't had the greatest track record sales-wise.
Yeah, they really haven't. But I have heard that since they partnered with Nintendo, things have gotten a little bit better. So yeah, that's kind of my viewpoint. Alex, your take on Gundam live action movie?
Sort of, I'll have to see it to believe it. It just sounds like one of those things that's gonna float around for many, many years before, if ever. I mean, come on, we're still all waiting on the Cowboy Bebop movie or the Outlaw Star movie. It's like
that's the other problem too. And we just barely heard that Macross got renewed, and they're considering a Macross or not a Macross, but a Robotech movie. Yeah, so that, and before people jump down my throat, there is a difference. Yes, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said Macross. It's Robotech. They want to do Robotech. And guys, it's just one of those things of like, it's a pipe dream. It's never happening. But then again, I was saying that about Ghost in the Shell. So if they want to prove me wrong, they're more than welcome to do so.
Well, yeah, again, added to the list, we have Gundam, we have Star Blazers, we have Cowboy Bebop, we have Naruto, we've even had Attack on Titan thrown into the development pool for a while for a U.S. studio to adapt it.
Who had Naruto? I can't even remember.
I don't know.
People got mad at it because the studio didn't make sense for it. And I remember people having an argument, speaking of Legendary, they're like, oh, Legendary should get Naruto. And I'm like, no.
If anything, and again, this is probably going to get people to bite my head off, because this exact combination was how we got Dragon Ball Evolution. But you would want to give something like Naruto to a studio that has experience with martial arts films. So probably something like Huayi Brothers, for example, would probably be able to do Naruto some level of justice, because a lot of people forget, yeah, you have the fancy special effects, but at its core, what fuels those attacks is martial arts. So you would want to give it to a team that knows how to choreograph fight scenes if you're going to do a live-action Naruto. Granted, that's what they tried to do with Dragon Ball Z, with Dragon Ball Evolution, so much so they even got Stephen Chow on board temporarily before he kind of saw the... I mean, some people believe, oh, he said, oh, we only wanted to work on stuff that he wrote, but my guess is that he probably saw, this is going to be a disaster. I'm going to get as far away from this as possible.
Pretty much.
I mean, honestly...
To answer your question, it's in negotiations at Lionsgate.
That's the problem.
That was
Naruto's going to become Hunger Games.
Well, to be fair...
That was back in 2015, mind you,
Yeah.
so... and I haven't seen any recent developments.
And to be fair, yes, Lionsgate put out Hunger Games, but they also put out Power Rangers. So it's even.
That's
it could
true.
go either way.
I can't make that argument anymore, can I? Because I like that Power Rangers movie.
Yeah, and honestly, the other thing to consider, and it's the problem that I've seen when people discussed the development of the Star Blazers film, is how are you going to approach it? I mean, with Star Blazers, the biggest problem that people ran into was the fact that they wanted to change even because a lot of people forget, even in the original English dub of Star Blazers of Space Battleship Yamato, they still acknowledged, hey, we built this ship out of the Yamato because it was the most intact battleship, whereas the people developing the US movie for live action wanted to change it to the USS Arizona because America.
Yeah.
Which again, that's a whole separate thing, but Gundam, you could go one of two ways. It really depends on whether you want to do the original story set in the Universal Century, set between the conflict between the Federation and the Principality of Zeon, or if you want to just say, okay, we're going to take the core idea of Gundam and just tell our own original story like Bandai has done in the past.
And if it's legendary, I'm guessing that's probably the direction they're going to go.
And honestly, that would be for the best because because let's face it, I mean, granted, people may say, oh, but they said the same thing about Star Trek. There's a lot of politics involved in Gundam. Yes, it is a robot series, but when you're considering the clashes between these warring factions, even with Gundam Wing, that's a tough sell for an audience unless it's like a hardcore sci-fi audience. Whereas if they did their own original story, maybe even something set way back in the earlier parts of the timeline before the Principality of Zeon even became a thing,
I would honestly tell them don't even try and mess around with UC because look, hardcore Gundam fans are probably going to come down on me too, but I don't care because I've been making my way through the Gundam series and I'm so sick and tired of the continuity errors and the problems that Universal Century has to it that I'm actually I'm at a point where I'm about to go into the alternate kind of timeline stories, and I'm very excited for that. And I'm dreading coming back to UC with Unicorn. I'm absolutely dreading it because there's so many continuity errors, so many problems with it that I'm done with Universal Century. And frankly, from what I've been able to read, Universal Century isn't the most popular thing that's worked out in the States. It's been the alternate timelines that have.
Mm-hmm.
So honestly, at that point, it's just better for them to go down that road.
Yeah, honestly, off the top of my head, probably and granted, I am even more of a Gundam noob. I haven't even finished Turn a Gundam, but looking at a concept that you could do as a movie feasibly, that would probably have to be something kind of like G Gundam, where instead of oh, it's this political drama, it's oh no, it's just a fancy tournament with people fighting in different giant robots. If you give it kind of the Real Steel treatment, where it's a case of, hey, we're not going to do something gritty and serious. This is just a big action movie where you have different people fighting in different giant robots. That could work.
When you bring up Real Steel, you also, I actually don't think G-Gun's a good comparison because now that Build Fighters exists, that's probably a little bit more akin to Real Steel. So at that, and here's the thing, if they did that, I'd have no problem with it because A, it advertises their Gunpla machine, and that's what they're looking to do, and B, that just that hypes things a little bit because you don't have to stay within the timelines, but you can customize the Gundams however you want.
Yeah, true, but that raises the question of how young are they going to aim the film?
That's the other problem is that Gunpla is built towards kids.
I mean, honestly, the best way I would see it is if you take kind of the premise of not the first but the second Zoids anime, where instead of it being oh, it's a fantasy world, it's just oh no, it's just we're a team of people who pilot these giant robots for these battles and it's treated as a sport. Taking something like that and doing that with Gundam, I think would probably be, one, the easiest to establish because you don't have to establish any fancy, oh, we have to establish a whole new timeline, I have to establish all these physics. It's just more oh no, we'll just make it like it's set in this world, but it's like this world in the not too distant future where giant
Yeah.
robots just happen to exist and are used for sport.
Yeah, and just to kind of wrap things up because we're almost getting ready to showtime. The other problem with this is that it's just an announcement. We don't have a director, we don't have a writer, we don't have anything like that. We know that Sunrises is working in hoping to do working in collaboration with Legendary, but we don't have any of the bare bones stuff that we need. We don't even have a draft right now for what they want to do. So right now the announcement's great, but we have nothing with which to work on.
Yeah.
Right now.
Honestly, here's my big pipe dream for the night. If they decide to go in a major collaboration, here's how I would probably do it. Do basically Super Robot Wars and use Gypsy Danger as the introduction point for Western audiences, and then basically be like, okay, we have these robots from other franchises that are popular in Japan.
Pacific Rim is Legendary, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, they could actually do that.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a good way to approach it, is that you have these robots from these established Japanese franchises, but then you have Gypsy Danger and whichever pilots you use, you can have them be the Western audience proxy being pulled into this world of giant robots.
That would be the weirdest circle of references if you think about it, because I know pieces of Gypsy Danger are inspired by the RX-78, but the biggest inspiration for Pacific Rim was the Cherno Alpha from the first movie, because it was based on the design of the Zaku. And so at that point, it's like you have the design of the Zaku, and then just think about a live action Gundam movie where you see like a Pacific Rim model. You're like, wow, references upon references. It's just blowing your mind.
Yeah. I mean, that would be the most expensive version they could do. I mean, unless they decide to do a giant robot cinematic universe, which honestly, I wouldn't put it past them. If the Gundam, live-action Gundam did well enough, and it's Bandai, they would probably get that cocky, but at the same time...
They need to jump that hurdle first before I'm willing to judge that.
Yeah.
So yeah, we need to get things going. So let's go ahead and get everything ready to go.
All right, sound speed.
I need to close a few things so that my internet's not going to lag everything. Are you ready, Alex?
Ready.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. All right. We got to turn things down a little bit here. Okay, bring everything back up the way it was. And here we go. Greetings once again, my friends. Or let's try that again. Okay, so greetings once again, and welcome to Geek News, Reviews, and Opinions, the podcast where we talk the week's events in Geek for Friday night, July 13th, 2018. I hope you guys brought your lucky four-leaf clovers, haven't stepped under any ladders, and definitely haven't crossed any black cat's path as we discuss the week's events in Geek. I am your host, Adam Mickelson, aka Drac. I hope everybody's having an awesome week despite Friday the 13th. And of course, with me is my usual panel of fellow geeks, fellow YouTubers, fellow awesome guys in generals. And if you guys aren't following them on YouTube and all their social media, what the F is wrong with you? And we're going to start things off with Stephen Romney of Studio Ghost Utah, of From the Shelf, of Rhapsody in Cinema, Monster Clash, Martial March, whatever he decides to work on, it's just gold. Stephen Romney, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. I mean, the week has been mostly good. It's had its fair share of ups and downs, but can't really complain.
All right. And then we also have Alex the Shadow Blazer himself, who has decided to grace us outside of the shadows, outside of the loving, warm embrace of all of his anime that he apparently is months behind. What on earth is wrong with that, Alex?
I'm doing well, thanks. Actually, last weekend I went to Salt Lake Gaming Con, which is our own little local gaming convention that runs over 2 days. I only went for the Saturday event, but it was fun and got to go to some pretty cool panels. I got to see Charles Martinet, the voice of Mario, and I got to see most of the primary cast of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And just for a treat for the YouTube viewers, I walked away with a nice little poster here that I bought. Kind of expensive. It's where's the autograph? You can see the autograph in the corner. It's autographed by the voice of Riju / Urbosa. I had to remember the character name for some reason. I wish I could have gone and got the whole cast to autograph it, but Unfortunately, it's one of those cases where the autographs are being charged for, and they're all like $40 a piece. So I figured, I'll go with the one, the Riju / Urbosa voice, because I also recognized her out of a recent anime I had watched, and I wanted to go kind of sing my praises to her about that, say, yeah, you did a good job. So I went for her, and same with Charles MartAnimE, also charging for autographs or selfies. So I got to put my money a little bit wisely, but hey, it was just fun to meet them and see them in person.
Very nice. So yeah, Salt Lake Comic Con, to all of our listeners who actually did reach out to me and go, are you actually there at Gaming Con? I had to disappoint a few people and say that I was unfortunately watching my daughter and couldn't find a babysitter. So I was not at Gaming Con, but thank you guys so much for understanding. I really do appreciate that. And at least you were able to see Alex. So at that point, if you were able to see Alex, that's awesome. And there you go. So like, I think next year we're going to try very hard to get some kind of presence over at Salt Lake Gaming Con, but this year it just didn't really work out, especially with baby on the way. So aside from that, let's go ahead and move on into the stories, because we've got a lot to go over. I'm not even going to lie here, guys. There's actually a lot of controversial stories that have happened over the last 2 weeks. In fact, for those who are actually asking, why on earth was there not a podcast? Basically, you guys kind of got given the break because of the 4th of July. But not only that, because I was actually off doing my own things and things got busy. So there you go. And actually, I just barely realized I brought up the wrong freaking agenda. So just bear with me as we go along. Everybody, talk amongst yourselves. I'll give you a topic. Talk amongst yourselves. I'll give you a topic. Here we go. So, yeah, we've actually got a lot of controversial stuff that happened both last week as well as this week, and you guys reached out and asked for opinions, as well as, are you guys going to talk about this on the podcast? So, I'm happy to tell you that, yes, we are. And starting with, I actually wanted to avoid this if we possibly could, but it wasn't entirely in the cards. So this is from last week, and it still is going. That's the thing. It's like, this story technically happened. It's done. It's over with, but it's still igniting the flames of controversy, so to speak, as ArenaNet. Well, this is actually going to take some setup for people. So a forum discussion happened, which was discussing the story of MMOs in general, but I believe it specifically went into the plot of Guild Wars 2, which is made by ArenaNet and Divoire Gaming. If I'm saying that wrong, I'm
Derar.
What was that?
It's Derar. There's no V.
Derar. Thank you. Jeez, I keep on thinking there's a V in there. Derar Gaming actually put up an interesting tweet after reading some of this forum thread and going into basically his theory of like the problems with the living story, especially in an MMO. And I could quote this thing verbatim, but everybody's kind of done that, and from both sides. But that's basically what he was trying to do. He was trying to quote, the problems of trying to tell a living story kind of perspective, especially in today with MMOs, and even cited Guild Wars as kind of actually, he didn't even cite it. The forum thread did.
Yeah. Well, we're kind of fudging a few details here. Luckily, I've been following this as well. What happened is that on Twitter, one of the writers of Guild Wars 2 by the name of Jessica Price posted a long Twitter thread discussing the process and perils of writing a story for an MMORPG.
Yes.
Specifically Guild Wars 2, since that is the company where she was employed. And at the end of her thread, Derar Gaming replied, respectfully disagreeing with some of her statements and offering his own opinions. And then here's where things got, well, messy.
So so to catch things up, so he left this. It was supposed to be 3 mini tweets. It eventually became a 4th one, just kind of going into his thoughts. And Jessica Price, literally, I think somewhere down that line, even though it's suspect as to where she could have gotten it from this tweet, took it as a personal attack and basically replied to him in this form, which is basically, I'm going to murder this, was like, okay, that's great, my dude. I'll take that into account. Then proceeded to quote the tweet and say this is exactly wrong with being a female game dev in this day and age. Okay, this is the actual quote from the tweet that she put up. Today, in being a female game dev, allow me, a person who does not work with you, explain to you how you do your job. So if we got a lot of hurt man feels today, let me make something clear. This is my feed. I'm not on the clock here. I'm your emotional courtesan just because I'm not your emotional courtesan just because I'm a dev. Don't expect me to pretend to like you here. And even going so far as basically saying any other asshat who wants to tell me how to do my job, which I've been doing for 2 decades, can feel free to be blocked from my Twitter feed. Okay. So she went on a tirade. I swear when you look at the D-Roar, there must be a missing tweet here somewhere because he must have mocked her mother or something with how she actually responded with it, which then in turn got her coworker, Peter, is it Freeze or Fries?
I've been hearing both. I've heard people pronounce it Fries. It's usually pronounced Freeze. I don't know. I just don't know.
We're going to go with Freeze just because I don't want people going, you did the fast food joke. But Freeze came to her defense in the usual kind of I'm your coworker fashion that we've seen here and there on Twitter. And then some time passed, and I swear something happened in between here, but basically we got an official statement from ArenaNet, specifically the CEO of ArenaNet, basically stating this. Recently, 2 of our employees failed to uphold our standards of communicating with players. Their attacks on the community were unacceptable. As a result, they're no longer with the company. So they basically clearly got fired. I want to be clear that the statements they made do not reflect the views of ArenaNet at all. As a company, we always strive to have a collaborative relationship with the Guild Wars community. We value your input. We make this game for you. So this is from CEO Mike O'Brien, who basically just terminated the both of them. And that's kind of the controversial discussion here. A lot of people believe that the termination was way too harsh a punishment for a situation like this one. And also there are a few people on the other side basically saying that this is a more worthwhile punishment because of the directions that she went. And considering that there is really no unfounded evidence to say that this guy was mocking her as a female game dev, he wasn't mocking her as a woman. He was simply getting into discussion about story development. So at that point, that's where we're going to kind of go into opinions here. So we also have had statements from Jessica Price since then, basically criticizing ArenaNet, saying, when I applied here, they said I could be able to say what I wanted, that I was going to be able to speak my mind on Twitter, and they were completely okay with that. And what makes this even guckier is our favorite frequent feminist decided to weigh in on this one as well, openly criticizing Mike O'Brien for his decision to terminate both Peter Freeze and Jessica Price. So with that being said, Romney, let's go ahead and get into your take on the situation. I'll go last because I've already talked way too much. But
honestly, it's not just the fact that Anita Sarkeesian chimed in. The other problem is you had other news outlets reporting the story.
Specifically, we're actually using a Variety article on this one, so that tells you something.
Yeah, so basically to explain why it became as big as it did, you had outlets like Kotaku and Polygon reporting on the incident, but slanting it to try to frame Jessica Price as the hero, for lack of a better term, trying to turn it into an issue about gender issues when that really isn't the case. And honestly, the reason I've been able to follow it, a big shout out to Yongya, who's been able to actually sort out and present the facts, because honestly, the way that it's been reported on other news sites like Polygon and Kotaku is just pathetic, especially given how they dismiss the statement from ArenaNet. And honestly, looking here, let's boil it down to what's basically happened here. It's not even a case of, this is like a political thing. It's like, no. The first thing is that she was under the assumption that Twitter is a private space. It isn't. Do you have no idea how social media works? Secondly,
which is sad because she is her official title at ArenaNet was community manager. So,
yes, and secondly, which goes into the other issue, is that she's like, this is my private thing. Like, yeah, but you were publicly announcing on your Twitter bio that you worked at ArenaNet and you were discussing content that you were working on for ArenaNet, discussing content that was being developed for Guild Wars 2. Ergo, you are representing ArenaNet even when you're off the clock. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is with social media.
Is that necessarily the fairest thing in the world? No, not really. But this is a public atmosphere. And when you actually say this is where you work and all that, there's a reason that certain game devs, and I applaud them for it, like some of them I know, they don't announce where they work unless you're very close friends. And it's just because they don't want it getting out that they work here so that people either A, start asking for favors, or B, start criticizing the game that they work on.
Yes, and the other important thing here that she threw the tantrum explaining like, oh, this is what it's like to be a female game dev. If Twitter was meant to be your private space, why did you have it as a public profile? Why didn't you private it so that way only the people you followed and the people you wanted to talk with could talk with you? And that's the other problem here. But as Yongya even pointed out, it's clear that she is someone who can dish it out, but can dish out criticism, but clearly can't take it.
No.
And before people saying, oh, but you're like ragging on like, oh, it's because she's a woman. No, here is the very bottom line, and it is the decision that Mike O'Brien had to make. When you're running a company that develops a game that thrives on community feedback, that needs a community, an active community, to maintain its player base, if you have someone who is going to attack players who are responding to public postings in a respectful way, that's going to damage your brand and make people less likely to play your game. So naturally, you're going to dismiss such a person.
And considering who an ArenaNet contends with in the MMO space, that hurts them. Like for even before people jump down my throat, World of Warcraft does this too, guys. The biggest thing about MMOs is player retention. You have to keep them involved in the world. And so at that point, I really think that MMO devs need to keep this as an example of like, this is how you do not communicate with the player base. Okay. It doesn't matter if you're in the right or they're in the wrong or whatever. You just don't go this far into it, because that basically means, oh, don't pay for my game anymore. And and here's the thing. Twitter's a public space. If enough people see how you interacted and are offended by how you interacted, they can choose to end their subscriptions too. And you could actually have your player retention hurt by actions like this.
Yes. And the other thing to consider is that, and a lot of people try to defend Jessica Price, and often using ad hominem attacks. For those of you who don't know, that is where you attack the person and not the argument. Every company has a social media policy. Hell, the company that I work for my 9-to-5 job also has a social media policy. I mean, their policy is straightforward, is don't talk about anything we plan on announcing unless you're a part of the marketing team. That's just the main basic rule, but that is how companies are in this day and age, is that every company, especially gaming, has a clear social media policy, something that Mike O'Brien even stated in a statement sent to Polygon when he was asked for comment regarding the firing. And he basically made it clear.
Additionally, in your case, I'm guessing, because most companies do this now, including retail, but they probably even looked at your social media before they even hired you to see if you were going to be a problem child.
Well, if they did, they didn't tell me, but that's usually the way they do it. They don't tell you that they're looking at your social media.
It's part of their background check policies now. So
yeah,
there you go.
And so to kind of get back on point, it's very much a clear case where she did not conduct herself properly in a manner that followed the codes of conduct outlined by ArenaNet, and thus she and Peter Freeze were punished accordingly. It was not an issue of gender. And here's the thing here's kind of the main problem that a lot of people have, a lot of people who are rationally minded have. Granted, I understand that that may be of an extreme way of saying it. If you really want equal treatment in the workplace, equal treatment doesn't mean, oh, everyone's treated like good. It just means, hey, man or woman, if you're an asshat, we're gonna kick you out. Plain and simple.
If you treat anybody, it doesn't even need to be a person who's subscribed currently to Guild Wars, World of Warcraft, Old Republic, whatever. You don't treat people like this in general, because the bottom line is that anybody is a potential customer for your MMO. And if they see you interacting like that, they're literally just going to turn their head and go, well, I'm going to go with those Blizzard guys because they actually treat us, respectfully.
Yeah, and plus the thing to consider, and it's something that a lot of people are even pointing out, it's a case of there were a lot of things she could have done if she wanted her Twitter account to be her private space, and yet she didn't. And one other argument people kept bringing up, which I feel is a false equivalent, is people kept bringing up how Hideki Kamiya conducts his Twitter feed, where he blocks people left and right. But here's the difference. Hideki Kamiya doesn't attack people who are tweeting at him that he doesn't like. He doesn't try to dogpile them. He doesn't post long threads about why they're jerks. He just says, okay, I'm blocking you, or doesn't even say that. He just blocks people and moves on. He just literally blocks, ignores it, doesn't engage, doesn't respond, and just goes on with his day. Why couldn't she have done this instead of, throwing a hissy fit on Twitter? Who knows? Who knows what's going on in her brain?
Your guess is as good as mine, but I mean, in regards to the whole Kamiya thing, I mean, I hate to go into this reference, guys, but it is a perfect reference here. I'm going to quote CM Punk, which is, Twitter's my front window. If I don't like what you're saying, I can close that effing window. So at that point, for people who want to criticize Hideki Kamiya for doing that, I do it too. And you could criticize me for it, but I usually have a premise for it. Either A, I don't want to be advertised endlessly, which seriously, guys, I've literally muted and blocked advertisers numerous times and they still show up in my feed. And then the other ones are people who outright attack people on a regular basis. So I have blocked celebrities. I have blocked other people that do that on a regular basis, because the bottom line is that eventually kind of wears on you mentally. If you just see people attacking people left and right, I tend to keep my feed where I'm getting along with people and I'm able to have those discussions. Okay. And so for people who want to get frustrated by that, is it necessarily a good thing? It's not, it's neither or in a lot of cases, because it's people exercising their freedom of speech. I hate to tell you that, but it really is that. If they don't want to hear what you're saying, they have the right to turn you off. Kind of thing. And that's the same deal here with Jessica Price. If she didn't like what was being said by community members, she could have easily privated that Twitter account and not had to deal with it. Kind of thing.
Yeah. And plus, another thing that people always forget, freedom of speech just means the government can't come after you.
Yeah.
A private company like ArenaNet, they can dictate those terms. That's why Jessica Price got fired, because they are a private company with an internal social media and code of conduct policy. And so it's a case of, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. Yeah, that just means Uncle Sam can't do anything. Doesn't protect you from anyone else.
Yep. Alex, you've been kind of rustling in your chair here. What is your take on the Jessica Price, Peter Freeze, ArenaNet situation?
I really don't have anything else I guess I can add, because Romney kind of said everything that needs to be said about it. She has a public profile that announces where she works. Therefore, she is by proxy representative of that company. This is why I myself always am very careful about what I discuss in my work life. And I always try to keep that very, very separate from what I do here on the internet and what I do on YouTube. I pretty much always try to avoid name dropping wherever possible.
Yeah. So I mean, but here's the thing, you kind of tend to keep yourself fairly private. And so I'm trying to actually compare, because I think on your Twitter page is your YouTube channel, because you're trying to advertise that. So you will take tweets and things like that regarding your videos. In this case, now I will point out for the record, Jessica Price has since changed her Twitter a little bit, but it's still a public profile. I can still come in here and I can see whatever I want to see on it. Same thing with Peter Freeze. And the funniest part about this whole thing is they are still complaining about the fact that the industry screwed them and ArenaNet and all that. And like Romney has stated, neither of them have addressed the fact that they might have actually done something wrong in this situation, which I hate to be the guy. You did.
You done goofed.
You really done goofed. Because my viewpoint is, and I've had a couple of people ask, as an independent creator, if you were the boss in the situation, how would you handle that? Okay, well, that's a difficult question to answer, especially when there's one aspect of this that I've always kind of had a theory about, and that is, before the firing happened, there was actually a good amount of time, I believe, where ArenaNet didn't make their announcement yet. And I thoroughly am convinced, because some companies with social media policies will do this to be able to try and avoid situations of termination, where they will reach out to that person and say, yeah, we just barely saw your tweets. Either take it down or please apologize. You are making fun of a community member. Okay. Or you are making light of one of our community members, and we don't appreciate that kind of thing. And that doesn't necessarily get disclosed because it doesn't need to be. And my guess is that the termination is because Jessica Price said, no, I'm not apologizing for him for the mean, nasty things he didn't say. And therefore they said, okay, well then we have no choice. That's my guess. I have no evidence to be able to found that, but that would be how I would conduct it. Is I would literally reach out to them and say, okay, you have two choices here. You have three choices here. You can either take down the tweet, you can keep it up, and you can apologize, or we're going to have to take some drastic measures. Would I fire them? Jessica Price, I would. I'd have no problem with it because she has already actively made a ton of bad publicity that adds to my workload as CEO. So I would fire her. Freeze, that's where it gets a little complicated, because all he did was step up for a fellow coworker. Okay. That's a difficult situation because he kind of got roped in to that. So again, I would reach out to him and say, can you apologize and all that, even though it wasn't your statement? Like, can you acknowledge the fact that there was some wrongdoing here? And if he said no, I don't know if I'd terminate him. Maybe I'd suspend him. And if he was being considered for management or anything like that, that's gone in an instant. Because the bottom line is if you want to get a management position, you try to make your manager have a less workload, not more. And that's not what happened here. Both of them added to their management's workload. So
yeah. And honestly, that's probably likely what happened, at least based on the statement that Mike O'Brien issued, the sole statement he was ever asked for, because again, because of the bias of the gaming outlets, that's why, I mean, I'm with a lot of people. It's weird that we're going off of a Variety story to report on this, but that's because Variety has been the most objective coverage of this incident that we can
really
find.
Have. I'm going to do something that I don't normally do. I'm going to compliment Variety on their coverage of this situation.
Yeah,
they've done a really good job.
Yeah, and that's the surprising thing, that an entertainment magazine that doesn't even cover gaming is being the voice of reason here, whereas stuff like Polygon and Kotaku are merely fanning the flames and trying to make the situation bigger than it actually is.
Yeah.
Honestly, looking at the way Jessica Price conducts herself, I mean, aside from the fact that she's probably never going to work in the industry ever again, it's very much one of those cases where she's.
I would say you're right. I would say at least for 3 or 4 years, she's blacklisted. Just because I'll stop interrupting in a second, but any game dev who does stuff like this they're just blackballed, because you can't trust them to be able to do that. And I would actually say in her defense, she needs to go through some kind of, because I know this crap exists, like social media training or sensitivity training, just to have on her record so that she can say, yeah, I'm not going to do this stuff anymore.
Yeah. And honestly, looking at this, I somewhat lost my train of thought, but looking at just the fact that she's probably not going to be able to get any work, she strikes me as the kind of person who likes to stir up trouble for the sake of attention, for the sake of making themselves look like a victim, for the sake of basically getting like that extra attention, and more or less trying to use sexism as a shield rather than actually fighting the actual fight that needs to be fought. And so, I mean, for people who've been following this, what's done is done. She's been dismissed from ArenaNet. There's nothing else to really say. My advice, don't continue following her on social media. Don't stand there watching the monkey rattling the cage. It's very much what I like to call the Queen Mab. Just turn around, forget, move on. There's more important things. Don't give her the attention, because that is what she is after.
No, but I will also say, because people wanted our opinion on this one, on this particular aspect of it, which was Anita Sarkeesian. I don't care. I honestly don't care, because Anita's presence is irrelevant in this whole argument. There was no anti-feminist commentary that was being made. There was no there's no tweet that Deror took down that said, oh, and it's because of those filthy female game devs. None of that exists. Your existence in this argument is moot. as far as I'm concerned. And then we do the Queen Mab thing and we turn around and we forget Anita ever existed as well. Kind of thing.
Yeah, that's all that can really be said, because as you put it, her opinions are irrelevant, because it's a clear-cut case where she was a jerk to a member of the Guild Wars community, a customer of ArenaNet, when it was not warranted. It's not as if she was publicly attacked by this community member. It was someone posting a civil rebuttal and comment on a feed she posted publicly, discussing things she was working on for her employer publicly, and yet she threw a fit because she posted on a public forum and didn't expect to get public feedback.
And before this argument gets sent to us, but he's a male gamer, and that's why this is such a problem. Gee, you like to set aside male gamers. It's almost like they're a race of some kind, and you are wholly against them. I didn't infer anything.
Yeah. Plus, the other thing to consider is that a lot of women on Twitter were also chiming in saying that
I love the fact that a bunch of female game devs came out against Jessica Price and said, no, you're in the wrong. That was entirely what should have happened. In fact, one of my favorites that is a podcast host came out against her, and she's actually had arguments and things like that I haven't agreed with in recent months. I'm glad that she came out and said, you know what, I develop mobile games and I develop a bunch of stuff. I work in the tech community, and I don't think you're in the right, Missy. So
yeah,
that's the way it goes. Final thoughts before we move on in this one, because I think we pretty much hit everything on this particular story. Have a nice life, Jessica Price. You're not going to be working in the gaming industry anytime soon, unless, Zoe Quinn or Anita have you working on a game.
Or if she decides to start her own company, which is also likely.
Good luck getting your game kickstarted.
Yeah. Then again, given the people who still follow Anita Sarkeesian, the money is there. It's just, yeah. Let's maybe change topics before this goes even further down a rabbit hole.
Yep. So the next one actually is involving another female game dev, one that is highly respected in the gaming community, and that is Amy Hennig. I always try to find some stories involving her because she's actually got some wonderful insight considering her history in the gaming industry. Now, I say that, but the recent interview that we're actually bringing up is kind of depressing in a really weird way. So recently, Amy Hennig talked to, I believe it wasn't Gear Nuke. I can't remember who actually conducted the interview, but she was talking about traditional single-player games in the current gaming industry.
It was VentureBeat.
It was a VentureBeat? Oh, VentureBeat, yes. So in this interview, she actually had a lot of somber things to say about single-player gaming as a whole, as it stands right now. And I'm just going to go ahead and quote the article on it. It's not that we're looking at the death of single-player games or players don't want that. Some publishers are going to fall on one end of that spectrum or another based on their business plan. Fair enough. It's just that the traditional ways we've done that are getting harder and harder to support. That's why I've talked in the past about feeling like we're in an inflection point in the industry. We've talked about this for a long time. How do we keep on making games like this when they're getting prohibitively expensive? We don't want to break the single player experience, but there's pressure to provide more and more at the same price point games have always been. That isn't sustainable, I believe. I think it breaks the purpose of a single player game. I was saying to some people here, I play games because I want to finish them. I want to see the story. I like the arc of a story. I don't see the end of most games. How crazy is it that we say it's about narrative, but we make games where a fraction of the audience sees the end of the game? That's heartbreaking. Okay. It goes on even further in that one, but basically that's her argument, is that it's getting even more expensive to give you these immersive single player experiences. And also it's just becoming unsustainable considering the fact that a lot of people don't finish them. Actually, another thing I would actually aid Amy's point in the fact that, Alex might kick me in the butt, but we Let's Players kind of also hurt that process too, because we give people a reason to never play the game. We give people a reason to just watch the game being played, and therefore they don't even have to pay the $60. they can just go see it, kind of thing. And that is a problem, especially considering that, as we've discussed numerous times, game budgets are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's becoming almost unsustainable to be able to do these single player narratives, especially with what current day players require to be in that narrative experience, kind of thing. So, like, for example, what do people think I'm talking about with that? Okay. When they're thinking single player games, unfortunately, what's one game that comes up? Either Elder Scrolls or Fallout. And therefore, any single player experience from a consumer's point of view, especially a brand new consumer, everything has to measure to that stick. Sorry. It has to measure to that stick, or it doesn't measure up at all. Okay. Everything else is considered a lesser venture. I, as a gamer, don't view it that way, but a brand new consumer might view it that way and immediately assume that every single player experience in a game, in the gaming world, is like this. And that's not entirely true. I would actually dare say that while the Uncharted games do give a little bit of an open world experience, they are very fixed in their storylines, and therefore are smaller games because they are more of a fixed narrative. God of War, the most recent one that came out, even though it does provide open world experiences, is still a fixed narrative and therefore smaller and probably even cheaper to make than, say, the recent Elder Scrolls title. Okay? Those are big freaking budgets. And so, yeah, but I've been saying this for years. This model is unsustainable. And what's really sad is that there are companies out there that are doing it, and they're doing it for cheaper, and they're getting criticized for doing it. For crying out loud, Koji Igarashi just put out a single player experience in Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, and he did it 8-bit, so it's cheap. It was actually a Kickstarter goal for not Ritual of the Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. It was for the Bloodstained Ritual of the Night game, and it was a Kickstarter goal for an 8-bit version that was basically a prequel. So at that point, like, there are people that are creating these single player experiences, and they're doing it cheaper. But you want to know one of the main differences is they're not teams. They're 2 or 3 people, maybe even 5. That's the issue. Is unlike them, you know. I'm just going to throw out companies here like Activision and EA, EA is getting ready to release Anthem from BioWare, and that's going to be a huge immersive experience. And you already know its budget's enormous. It's probably not even going to be able to make that budget back.
Yeah, another thing to consider as well, it's not even just the fact that single player games are getting hard to sustain just by sheer budget, but there's also a case of a perceived demand from the industry when you consider what happened to to games like Mass Effect, a story-driven game that had multiplayer shoehorned into it for no good reason. I mean, imagine if Ken Levine decided to make BioShock in this day and age. Imagine that none of the BioShock games ever existed, and he decided, okay, let's make this single-player first-person adventure game set in this underwater city. What would be the first thing any developer said? Like, oh, it's a first-person shooter? Where's the multiplayer? Because let's go back even further.
Let's go back even further for you, Romney. Gabe Newell is getting ready to develop a test game that he calls Portal. That comes out now. People are wondering, where's your Portal multiplayer?
Yeah, or an even better example. Imagine that for some reason its software suddenly didn't exist and then suddenly started. Imagine them trying to put out something like Doom, which was designed first and foremost as single player. That would naturally also have the question.
Holy crap! If you tried to put out the original Doom and it didn't look like the most recent edition, it'd fail.
Yeah, and so
it would be considered an indie darling, and therefore a lot of that mainstream audience wouldn't pick it up.
Yeah, and again, it's kind of a chicken or the egg scenario. Our audience is not willing to pick it up because the game companies aren't putting. It's very much one of those cases that the industry is thinking, oh, is it because it doesn't have multiplayer that people are picking it up, or is it because people are picking it up because I'm butchering the phrasing, but it's also a case, how much is it the actual sales numbers, and how much is the games industry, the companies themselves, making assumptions about the player base that are based on nothing?
Yeah, well, and the other thing that people have to consider, and then we'll get to Alex, because he's twiddling his chin. I think he's got some thoughts. But So at that point, the other thing that hurts single player experiences these days, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you already have a ton of single player experiences out there that have to rival MMOs in size, scope, what you can do, what you're not able to do, everything like that. And the problem is that MMOs cost a lot of money. They cost a ton of money, and part of that is because of not only the development, but also the balancing, the community management, all that stuff. And that hurts the whole process. Whereas you could have had a game that doesn't necessarily involve too much open world, and it doesn't have to have all of these open world-esque kind of... The best example that I can give you guys is my biggest gripe, and I just barely put this review out. My biggest gripe with God of War 2018, it has RPG aspects that don't make sense within the context of God of War. Okay? God of War is... You get weapons, you upgrade them with souls, and that's roughly how that goes. You don't have to worry about the armor set that Kratos is wearing or Atreus is wearing, and that is where the problem lies, because if you have an armor system, that means there have to be different appearances, which means you have to put your devs towards working on those appearances. Therefore, you have to have at least 50 or so different designs for both Kratos as well as Atreus, as well as any other character in there, just in case they have a secret model or whatever. That adds to the game time, or to the development time, that adds to the money that's going into that project. And instead, my argument is that, yes, we could actually sustain this, but we actually have to look at that budget and go, where can we start cutting corners? Do we need to have this RPG system, or can Kratos simply upgrade his weapons like he has in every single game? Well, since people come for the story of the game, and I'm there with you guys, God of War story was amazing, but the RPG stuff was an unneeded hassle and could have easily been cut from that budget and probably could have even profited from it.
Yeah. Honestly, the best way to sustain a sort of single player experience, I mean, I hate the fact that I'm using this as an example, mainly because of their track record, but the way Capcom approached it with Resident Evil 7 is probably the only way to really sustain it, where you have the initial campaign, and then you have subsequent episodes released as DLC. I mean, at the very least, Capcom knows how to count to 3, so it's a case where that's probably the only way to really sustain a single-player model, something that even Henning points out, where, okay, if you're going to have these smaller games that release these single-player campaigns, doing it the episodic model is probably the way you can sustain it, since it keeps players coming back. But again, companies have tried episodic gaming. They just haven't worked out the kinks in the sense of having an actual consistent schedule. Again, this is something that again, Capcom is like the only company that's actually done it right, because again, Resident Evil Revelations 2 had a schedule and followed it, as opposed to, say, Telltale.
Yeah. And the other thing that I want to bring up is rivaling MMOs in scale. Okay. This is another problem that's happening, and nobody in the MMO community wants to admit it, but it's true. MMOs are dying. Okay. Yes, you have the subscription fees, and those are keeping them floating. But at the same time, you have to, like, Blizzard's already trying to figure this out. Because if you look at it, World of Warcraft, which used to be their biggest selling game, is now so much lower than its competitive games now. Hearthstone has a bigger audience than World of Warcraft now. So does Overwatch. And so at that point, their efforts are going towards that. And really, like, the World of Warcraft audience is what's sustaining World of Warcraft right now. I'm not saying MMOs are bad, but the bottom line is that they're showing their true colors here as being unsustainable as a genre in gaming. And so in a lot of cases, a lot of people have not liked my opinion on this, but we do need to step backwards a little bit in game development. Otherwise, because where do budgets go for? Like, we think they're enormous now. Wait 5 years, they're going to get even bigger because of the expectation, and then it's going to be truly unsustainable. And we can't actually put out those games. And it's going to be the indie darlings that are going to be able to do it because they're getting nothing but solid profit. Most of that stuff was done with them.
Well, here's the way I kind of see what we're seeing here with what Amy Henning is saying is very similar to what Spielberg was saying about film. We're kind of getting to the point where the mid-range title is starting to disappear, we're going to basically be stuck with the huge multiplayer, massively marketed AAA titles and then the small critical indie darlings. We're losing that middle ground. Now, granted, that is a hyperbolic example. And again, there are ways around it. There's just, I mean, one is you don't have to drop like $600 million on a game in order to make it good. I mean, look at what happened to Resident Evil 6. Like, that's how much Capcom spent on it. And they lost all that money because they didn't understand,
and
hey, let's maybe...
correct me if I'm wrong, 7's budget is less than 6, isn't it?
Yeah, because they had to, 1, pull everything back internally, 2, slash the budget, and 3, they had to bring in a whole bunch of new talent. And so it's a simple case of...
Look at the difference, guys!
It kind of goes to show... It kind of goes to show it's not so much a problem of increasing budgets or trying to increase player retention. It's a case of maybe instead of trying to make your games appeal to everyone, maybe just acknowledge, okay, Resident Evil is a niche franchise. Let's cater to that niche instead of trying to force it to be Call of Duty, because that was the mistake they made with 6.
Exactly. Like, I get that shooters are popular right now, guys. I really do. But so are platformers. There's always going to be a niche audience for platformers, especially in the fact that it's going to be kids. There's always going to be a niche for RPGs like Mass Effect, as well as JRPGs like Octopath Traveler. Those will always have their own specific genres and niches. And in a lot of cases, it actually would be better to not actually go toward, like, if one company had one really big title that they were trying to sustain, that would make sense. And then a bunch of other mid-range titles that can kind of bring that profit in. But that's not what's going on here. EA is like literally leaning towards everything being huge. Activision already kind of has that because most of Blizzard's games are that way. So already we're kind of moving towards a model that's really unsustainable. And we really need to, as Romney says, recover the mid-range title for people to be able to get excited about. Alex,
and more
go ahead.
Oh, yeah, and more specifically, stop trying to appeal to everyone because you'll end up appealing to no one.
Yeah, exactly. Alex, what's your take on this situation?
Well, first, at least a little praise to Henning for not usually going the route we see with like comments like this, where it's always like they're shouting doom from the rooftops, right? Well, we see that with EA CEOs or whatever a lot. It's like, this is not a thing anymore. Ha ha ha. No, she's at least trying to be like, okay, here's kind of the realities of the situation. So I praise her for that. And I see where she's coming from. I kind of get why she definitely feels the model's becoming unsustainable. And this goes into the whole argument, should we start raising the price point of video games a little bit, which is a whole argument in itself that we can't go down because that's a rabbit hole in itself.
Well, yeah, and I've already answered this on a number of occasions. Like, you and I have had this discussion, and it's like, okay, do they deserve that increase of price point? Because if they do, then sure. But if they don't, then no.
But I really, I mean, I'm not an expert. I don't make games or anything, but I really feel like just smart budgeting and marketing, will go a long way into maybe cutting down your budget a little bit. I mean, people are already clamoring for what will be the PS5. And I'm like, guys, I know we're already quite a few years into PS4 here. So by law,
Xbox has already teased their next console. So like we have PS5, we have Xbox 2.
It's like, slow it down, guys. I know we've made the huge stride from the early Polygon era to where we are now. It is a night and day difference from PlayStation 2 where we are now. But why are we already clamoring for next gen? Yeah, that's just driving this endless arms race of cycle of development, and that's why we're stuck with shitty companies like EA that will find every nook and cranny to milk every last nickel, dime, and dollar out of everybody that they can. Yeah, and and I'm just thinking,
while they do that, a lot of the studios that we like Factor 5 and Rare, they get absorbed into these big companies, and then they're never heard from again. Roughly, like,
either they they're never heard from again because they either just get dissolved instantly, or they make maybe one flub or one flop, and then boom,
they're not trusted
dead
anymore.
It's like EA is a serial killer of
which is another problem I think the game industry has, but that's a discussion for another day, which is like we really ought to stop having that whole you got one flop, you're no longer trusted, we have to wait like 5 years before you get to game direct ever again kind of thing, because that also hurts, because sometimes I've had this discussion with numerous people. First entries are always going to be rough. First entries are always going to have these little issues here and there. That's fine. It's the second entry that defines that franchise or that genre, because that's where they start ironing out the kinks, kind of thing.
And we do need to embrace the mid-range games. I mean, you and I just did a playthrough of Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, which is essentially which was an indie game that had all the looks and feels of a big AAA game without the AAA budget attached to it. It was made for maybe a few million dollars.
That is capable of AAA caliber, but didn't have the AAA budget.
Yeah, it was probably made for a few million dollars. It sold gangbusters. I know everybody's going to be like, but that's just one example for every other 20 million failures. Well, that's the entertainment industry. That just goes to show you a little smart budgeting, smart marketing, and maybe not that endless craving to make the next annual franchise that will continue to be milked out for 20 years. Well, isn't always the best goal to strive for. Maybe trying something a bit more mid-range to the lower range that can look good, play good, is good. That's why I like Nintendo. They don't need to be the most powerful, up-to-date kid on the block. They just can make an entertaining game. I want to go get a Switch right now.
Well, but the other point that I want to help you out with that, Alex, is you brought up Hellblade. Okay, how did they get that budget? A AAA company didn't give it to them. They funded it out of their own damn pockets, people. That's what they did. That's in a lot of cases, that's when a lot of really great gems and franchises happen, is that they aren't proven yet. And therefore, Insomniac has to pay the capital to put out Spyro the Dragon. Or they get totally trusted on making Spyro and they want to step out and do something else. So they have to put up a decent amount of money into the budget of something like Ratchet and Clank. And when it's successful, that's when Sony gets on the hype train. Until then, they have to prove themselves. And so in a lot of cases with these games, I disagree, and I contend with you on this one point, Alex, that you're not able to comment on it. You're a creator. You're a story, you've written stories yourself, and you already know the process that you'd have to go through to get this story in game or anime or any like that format. And therefore, where I'm actually saying is you're a little bit more adept at being able to discuss this. Like Amy Hennig, you'd be literally looking at that budget and going, okay, where can I cut corners to be able to give this authentic feel to this character, but at the same time do it as cheaply as possible so that I can then earn respect from the studio for spending as little as possible to allow for more profit.
Yeah, you got to be mindful of that. I mean, once upon a time in the movie industry, before the days of everybody trying to make a cinematic universe out the gate, movie sequels generally had to be earned. And even if there were plans, even Harry Potter had to start a little bit small. I love the first movie. It's, I think it's kind of a bad rep these days, but even the first movie had a few rough edges around there, and the budget was probably kind of modest.
Yeah, exactly. Book popularity wasn't necessarily buying that into there. Chris Columbus had to cut corners to be able to make that feasible for Warner Brothers, and then only then after it sold well, that's when they said, okay, we're on board with this.
Yeah,
but I'll bet you Chris Columbus had to work his butt off to make that pitch.
Yeah, and of course the visual effects were able to get better as every movie got going, because every movie was making more money. So that's the process.
Plus, to even go even further, a lot of people forget, there was the first Harry Potter movie, but when you consider when J.K. Rowling had to pitch the very first version of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, back when it was just a novel, back when it hadn't even been published yet, when large multi-book franchises for children hadn't really happened since the days of L. Frank Baum, it's kind of a case where, hey, yeah, even Harry Potter had to prove itself and build that audience before we could even think of getting the film version.
Exactly. I mean, so we kind of have to wrap up this discussion because we're a little over time. But what I'm trying to point out to people at least a little bit is like I think we're all pretty much in agreement. We agree with Amy Hennig that things are getting a little out of hand and they're getting unsustainable, and we do need to rein things back in and start working on the mid-range titles to be able to keep things going as smoothly as they can. It's actually one of the main reasons why I still get controversy on this one. I'm very heavily debating whether or not to review Anthem next year, because I mean, yeah, it's great and all that it's got mech suits and everything like that. Like, it's got all the buttons that I want, but at the same time, I'm kind of tired of sustaining the really big games. I'm really interested in sustaining the middle efforts that I think are done with a lot more polish on them. Because I literally look at Anthem and I look at Destiny and especially the horror stories people were telling me about Destiny 2 and just going, oh, well, AAA games have one thing in common. They're horrible glitch fests. And I'm not interested in playing glitch fests. I'm interested in playing the latest Uncharted, which is a mid-range title and will have an engaging story kind of thing. So final thoughts before we move into Nintendo talk this evening.
I think we've pretty much effectively nailed this thing every way possible. It's more nail than coffin at this point.
Pretty much. So the first thing that we actually need to discuss for Nintendo Talk this time, we did have a couple of other stories, but I'm actually going to hold them back, and you guys will see my reasoning for that soon. But the first thing I want to get into for Nintendo Talk is that there is rumors of a new trademark that might just tell us what the next mini console is going to be coming out, because a lot of the recent patents that Nintendo has filed have been GameCube related. So it looks like they actually might skip Nintendo 64 Mini and go straight to GameCube Mini. I don't know if I necessarily buy this personally, but what do you guys think? Like, do we actually see them doing GameCube Mini before they do, for crying out loud, Nintendo 64 Mini, Game Boy Mini? Like all that stuff.
I sincerely doubt it. I mean, given one, skipping a generation, and two, they haven't even worked out the virtual console framework for the Switch yet. Honestly, looking at the trademarks, and especially when you consider them announcing the GameCube controllers for the upcoming version of Smash Brothers for the Switch.
Yeah, so your Wii U GameCube controllers will work on Ultimate, and so like a lot of people are supporting that with that.
Yeah, and so more than likely what it might be is that it might just be something that will either be digitally or even some sort of peripheral that will allow you to play the GameCube games, likely digitally. I mean, unless they decide, oh yeah, here's a disc tray you can connect to your Switch, just in case you wanted to play your GameCube games on the space shuttle. But
I mean, for crying out loud, I'm actually happy that they've kind of gone back to the drawing board and made the NES and the SNES minis a little bit more available. And not just in such limited niche times, because finally, like a lot of people that I knew that wanted either to get an SNES mini or an NES mini have now since been able to do that, and they've been very happy with it. But yeah, I don't buy that one. I don't even buy N64 Mini right off the bat. I actually think the next step would be Game Boy Mini if they were going to go down that road, and I don't know if they're willing to do that.
Honestly, the closest thing I could see is them doing what Namco did back in the PlayStation 1 days, where instead of trying to release like mini console of these games, just doing a case of, oh, hey, you have a Switch? All right, here's a compilation of these games that were on GameCube, or a compilation of these games that were on N64. When you consider, particularly with
that
GameCube,
would be a lot easier. I mean, for crying out loud, that's what Wii U did. They went backwards one generation and just started releasing Wii games to be able to download on that eShop, and eventually I think they even added a few GameCube games on there too.
Well, more that the GameCube games were ported to like with Wii controls. I know that was kind of something Nintendo did a while back, particularly with Pikmin and Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil 1 remake.
Metroid Prime Trilogy, which got ported to Wii, eventually got moved over to the Wii U eShop.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
point being, that's likely what they're going to do is either they're trying to find a way to bring the GameCube games to the Nintendo Online eShop or some sort of streaming service that allows people to play these GameCube games, because releasing a GameCube Mini, when you really think of the logistics, one, what games you're going to do, two, how much is it going to cost? Because these games are robust. It's not like the NES games where they're in the megabytes range. You're dealing with matters of gigabytes here, which means if you're going to put more than like 5, you're looking at a pretty expensive plug-and-play console, and they already saw, oh, hey, that didn't quite work with the NES Mini and SNES Classic. Maybe
hence why I'm making the argument that a Game Boy Mini would be a lot more plausible because of the storage space. They'd be able to put in so many more games. Even N64 Mini is a lot more plausible than GameCube Mini, because at that point, storage was still not that big because they were bound to cartridges.
Yeah, plus some of the games that they would want to put on a GameCube Mini have already been re-released. Yeah. I mean, again, I keep bringing up Resident Evil because it's on my brain lately, but because, Capcom eventually went okay, well, we had this initially GameCube exclusive remake. Enough time has passed. We're going to release our GameCube games everywhere else now. We've done our deal, Nintendo. We're going to now release it other places. Same case with Resident Evil 4. I mean, even Nintendo themselves re-released Twilight Princess and Wind Waker on the newer consoles.
Yeah. Alex, what's your take on the GameCube patents here? Do you think we're going to get a GameCube Mini?
I was willing to jump down the idea that we were going to get one because we've had some pretty striking accuracy with a lot of Nintendo patent talk before, only minus the space shuttle concept. But time is still on our side for that one.
But sorry, man. It'll come, I guess.
But yeah, I guess logistically, yeah, it is a bit complicated. I guess it could be one of those hypothetical patents that, they're considering and they're filing to just cover their bases. I don't know. We'll have to see. I don't really see a Game Boy Mini because I just feel like, if anything, I feel like Game Boy games, Nintendo would just pursue a mobile route with those. Is just release Game Boy games on mobile phones, because Nintendo's probably going to want to expand more into their mobile markets. So yeah,
I will say this: if they're going to do GameCube Mini, they need to figure out an extension for hard drives at this point, because I haven't hit that point yet, but I know of a lot of people who have already hit the hard drive or the full point on their Switches. Okay, and that wasn't a whole lot to begin with. And already the Wii U was also another big issue there. They really need to figure out their hard drive stuff at this point. That's why in a lot of cases I'm kind of hoping that before they get into the GameCube Mini and the storage capacity that we're looking at for those games, they need to figure out the fact that they are already not putting in too much storage in their existing consoles. And that's, handhelds included. For crying out loud, the Vita actually had better, for a while there, had better storage than the 3DS. Because you could get full on 60 gigabyte cards, and then eventually that upgraded to 128 and 256 and all that. So they really do need to figure out the storage capacity problem. So I think we pretty much hit the nail on the head here. So the next story that we need to get into is, I'm going to preface this by simply saying this story is from 4chan. Okay? Not the most reputable source, but here we go because you guys wanted us to talk about it. So 4chan believes that they've gotten some speculation as to the recent release, or at least the leaks for Smash Bros. Ultimate, and how they're going to be going on until the game's released. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and read this verbatim, and then we'll get into what they assumed, and then we'll get into what you guys think of it. So, okay, Kitty, see if you can figure this one out. July, the characters King and Ponytail will be revealed in a mini direct. I don't know where their evidence is coming from this, but okay. August, the character Old Man will be revealed at this year's EVO. September, the character Archer will be revealed in a direct of some kind. October, the characters Warrior and Secretary will be revealed in the Smash Ultimate Focus Direct. November, the character Mech will be revealed in a surprise character announcement. The other characters. The characters Rhythm, Folklore, Doll, and Prime Ribs won't get reveal trailers until post-release. Okay? So, now that I've gone into those, let's actually go into the speculation as to who they might be talking about. The first clue that they discuss is King. And immediately, they've lost me. Because their speculation is that the announcement for King is going to be King K. Rool for Smash Bros. Ultimate. I immediately want to ask the question, how much are they paying Microsoft? The second one, Ponytail is suspected to be Dixie Kong. Old Man is speculated to be Cranky Kong. Or, since it's at EVO, they're speculating that there will be a collaboration with Namco or Bandai Namco to get Heihachi into the game. Archer is speculated to be Pokemon Decidueye from the Sun and Moon games, according to this story. Warrior is their guess is Simon Belmont. So already they're having to pay Konami for Snake. They're
and
going
Bomberman.
and Bomberman. So yeah, there you go, Simon Belmont. Secretary is hinted to be Isabella from Animal Crossing New Leaf. Then in November, we go to Mech. The guess for that is Elma from Xenoblade Chronicles X, a game that wasn't as successful in the States as it probably should have been compared to Japan. Rhythm. This is where it gets so bad. Rhythm, maybe a reference to Chorus Kines from the Rhythm Heaven series. Folklore is supposedly a reference. Actually, they don't know who Folklore is. Doll, they're assuming, is going to be the long-awaited Geno from Super Mario RPG. And Prime Ribs, their only guess is that it has something to do with Metroid Prime and are guessing Dark Samus. So, those are all the speculated characters. Romney, just thoughts. I'm going to go last on this one.
Well, looking at what we know about the production of Super Smash Bros., the only ones that seem the most likely out of this list, Heihachi, for one, makes sense, because they already have Pac-Man.
Bandai Namco is working on it, yeah.
Yeah, Bandai Namco's working on it. The fact that it would be at EVO, and the fact that we've had a Tekken game on a Nintendo console, actually on two of them. There was Tekken Advance, and we've had Tekken Tag Tournament on the Wii U. So someone like Heihachi wouldn't be out of place, especially as a nice counterpoint to a character like Ryu. As for Decidueye, it makes sense. I mean, we got Lucario, we got Greninja, so it would make sense. Okay, adding a Pokemon from the newer generation wouldn't be too
that's the popular one that people want from Sun and Moon is Decidueye.
Yeah, and then Isabella from Animal Crossing, I can see it. It's a first-party title, and it's a newer character in the series, so it would make sense to give that a little bit of spotlight, considering some of the niche characters they add. The ones that the one that I'm skeptical, but I can see happening, could be Simon Belmont, because of the fact that they've already paid for Bomberman, they already paid for Snake. Likely, Konami probably asked, okay, you want to bring Snake back? Add in these couple of characters in your game. Add in Bomberman so we can promote Super Bomberman R. Oh yeah, go ahead and add in Simon Belmont so we can promote a re-release or something. I can see Konami making that bargain to allow them to use Snake. The ones that I don't quite see, I mean, Rhythm Heaven, I mean, there are some characters from Rhythm Heaven that could work, maybe as an assist trophy, but not as a fighter, and that's where things get kind of tricky, and people give up on Geno. The fact that it's a skin for the Mii fighter, you're not getting Geno. I mean, I'm sorry, that's just the way it is.
I can already tell you, like, two that you need to give up on right now, because the other one I think that is possible, that you kind of skipped over, is that, like, if Heihachi is viable because of Bandai Namco, so is a Metroid Prime 1 because they have Metroid Prime 4. But it would be something related to Metroid Prime 4. It would not necessarily be Dark Samus unless she shows up there. So at that point, like, that's feasible. The ones that I think are not feasible, King K. Rool. Again, how much are you paying Microsoft for that? Because that's a Rare property and they own Rare. The second being Simon Belmont, because Konami might be asking for a lot of money. And so at that point, it may not be feasible to get another Konami character aside from the ones they already have. That's my guess on the matter. Gino is also unlikely because I don't care what people say. Oh, Cloud gets them back in good graces with Square Enix, and that's how they can get Gino. No, if they wanted Gino, they could have gotten Gino already. And instead they decided to give you a kit where you can make your Mii look like Gino. They should have just given you Gino. Kind of thing. So Gino's not likely, in my opinion. The other one that I also don't believe is Elma, and that's just because Xenoblade Chronicles X, as opposed to Xenoblade 1 and 2, not as successful from what I understand financially as those two. So at that point, Elma doesn't make sense either. Now, Cosmos, because she's Bandai Namco, kind of does, but that's a stretch.
Yeah, very much a stretch, since she herself, I think the only Nintendo title she's appeared in has been Project Cross Zone, and that's about it. Whereas
Chronicles X, she also showed up. She was DLC.
Yeah, but point being, that wouldn't really be a character they would want to push. A character like Heihachi, because Tekken 7 has a solid foothold, that would be one they'd want to push. Maybe even a Soul Calibur character, but given that Soul Calibur is not, that Soul Calibur 6 isn't going to come to the Switch, highly unlikely.
Now, what about Dixie and Cranky? Do we see those?
Well, Dixie, she would clearly be an echo of Diddy Kong. There's no other way you'd really do it. That would just be a clear echo. Cranky Kong, again, another echo. So it's very much, what's the point? And so looking at it, there are some that seem likely, but others, it's probably wishful thinking. Particularly any other characters from the Rare library, because I'm not sure if Microsoft specifically owns King K. Rool or any of the characters from Donkey Kong Country. From what I understand, those characters are just stuck in a bit of a legal rights limbo.
Yeah, the Kremlins themselves are stuck in basically limbo because Rare still kind of has them, and then there's some debate as to whether or not Rare gets the rights or Microsoft gets the rights, since Microsoft owns Rare. We don't know, and that's why I'm saying, like, the Kremlins, yeah, you're not seeing them, and therefore you're not seeing King K. Rool.
Yeah, except maybe as a trophy you can pick up, like you got in Melee, and that's about it. And even then, that's pretty much it. So looking at it, that's
an easier thing to get away with because it's not necessarily a character; it's just a little Easter egg.
Exactly. Yeah. And honestly, looking at this, and again, considering that it's coming from 4chan of all places, it's probably best to take everything we're speculating on with the grain of salt about the size of your fist.
Yeah, pretty much. Alex, what about you? What are you taking away from this 4chan story? Do you think any of these have validity to them?
I'm actually going to predict that the old man is the old man from Pokemon Red and Blue. And by him being in the game, we'll finally be able to summon Missing No from a Pokeball, and the whole game will just blow up. It will literally just explode. And we'll have to go buy new Switches.
I thought you were talking about Professor Oak. I'm like, wow. I think he has a name, Alex.
No, not Professor Oak. The old man who shows you how to capture a Pokemon and thus made it possible to use the Missing No exploit in Pokemon Red and Blue.
All right.
So there's my speculation there. And it's 4chan, so anything goes at this point.
Yeah. Honestly, that would make for a very interesting Pokeball, like doing something like Missing No. Like, if you kept, like, the randomized stuff, like probably having it where it would suddenly... Well, no...
People have been asking for a Missing No Pokeball for years.
Like, honestly, the way I can see it would be similar to something like the Nintendog Assist Trophy, where it specifically makes it hard to see what is going on in the game, causes the terrain to wig out or something, or suddenly just turns all items in the arena into banana peels.
Okay. So,
turns all players into Jigglypuff.
I would love that.
So, yeah, this is kind of where my opinion lies too. Is like, as much as I would like to believe that a lot of this stuff is probably going to happen, I just have to look at this logically. You know, like Dixie Kong, maybe. Cranky Kong, maybe. Like they could make sense. Heihachi makes sense, but then you throw in left hooks like King K. Rool, Gino, Simon Belmont, and that's where I have to kind of sit there and question. Simon Belmont is likely, but it means that they have to pay out more money to Konami for that. And I don't know if Nintendo's willing to do that. And the other one that I also think is possible is Decidueye, because Pokemon is popular and they always look to add one new Pokemon in brand spanking new, like from a brand spanking new gen to a Smash Brothers game. And I'm okay with that. In fact, that actually I would have an additional question on that one, because with the Pokemon trainer being added, and I don't know if this ever actually got addressed, the Pokemon trainer happened in Brawl, but Charizard became his own thing in Smash 4. Is Charizard still his own individual thing, or did he get thrown back into the Pokemon trainer? I don't know. And I would really like to have that answered, by the way.
Yeah. Like, did they shove him back into the Pokeball?
Yeah, something to that effect. So it's one of those things that, back on point, is like, I have to take the source that is saying this, which is 4chan. And 4chan is notorious for trolling and for April Foolsing and all that stuff. And then on top of that, just looking at some of the likely announcements, they don't make sense. So that's what I would say is kind of what Romney was saying. Take it with a ginormous grain of salt, because there's no other way to be able to do it. If some of those are right, great. But I'm not necessarily going to go, oh, they got the October one right, so November has to happen. No, not necessarily. Also, the other thing too, game companies like to be deceptive about their announcements. They like sending you down the wrong path, because then at that point they can surprise you with what's real and get even bigger reactions out of it.
Yeah, which means, for all we know, the old man could be the old man that gives you the sword in the original Legend of Zelda.
That was actually one other thought I had, is like, we have to do the
it's dangerous to go alone. Take this.
And then all of a sudden, boom! Actually, you know what? He should be like a random summon that can happen. Is all of a sudden he puts out the sword and it just sends out waves that kill everybody. You should never take the sword away from the old man. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move on into the first story that we have on the entertainment portion of the evening, which is another controversial one, but this one's more recent to this week. So recently, the article that we're running off of is from One Angry Gamer, but I have seen this hit mainstream sources too. The Creators Guild has dropped a cosplayer from some of their panels at upcoming conventions following sexual harassment complaints. And this is all surrounding a cosplayer by the name of Momo-kun, or her real name is Mariah Malid, but she is better known in the cosplay community as Momo-kun. And she's basically, what happened here was she was supposed to do a bunch of cosplay panels with the Creators Guild. And amidst that happening, we then started to have people coming out, kind of like the Me Too movement, roughly. So the first one actually came out where they announced that she was going to be working with them. And then we got Bunny Ayumi, who came out and said, or was she the first one? Yeah. Momo-kun slapped my ass in front of a large crowd without permission after I had just met her. And then the accusations continued to flow. Okay. They're accusations, right? It's all on Twitter. People could be lying, et cetera, et cetera. Problem is, we have video. There's actually video evidence of her harassing people, including grabbing one of her. Now, admittedly, it's one of her friends, but she lovingly grabs one of her friend's boobs for a long time and decides to fondle for quite a bit. And we even have on camera, although I was not able to find the actual video of it, of her groping a guy's ass. And it just gets worse from there on in. So unfortunately, the Creators Guild has officially announced that they are severing their partnership with Momo-kun, and Momo-kun will not be appearing on those panels. We'll get into the other part of this, but I want to just initially get people's opinions on this one. Alex, what's your take on the Momo-kun situation?
Makes sense. She's being a complete dumbass and well, not conducting herself appropriately. You know, there are signs. I saw them at Gamescom last weekend. Cosplay does not equal consent. That goes both ways. The cosplayer cannot harass people or touch people unwantedly. The same goes for us who admire cosplayers. We cannot harass or touch them unwantedly. you got to get that kind of permission if we got to get that kind of permission to, say touch a cosplayer, which I generally don't feel a need to touch cosplayers unless they actually ask me to or something. But if you got to get kinds of permissions, or, we have to remember that cosplay does not equal consent, then the same goes for the cosplayer themselves.
Yeah, usually to the extent, like I've taken a couple of pictures with a bunch of cosplayers, especially when I went out to like Salt Lake Comic-Con and all that. And the most that I ever did, just because I appreciated their hard work and their effort that went into the costume, is I shook their hand, and that's it. And it's unfortunate that we have situations that happen like that, roughly on every spectrum. Okay, guys can do it, sure, girls can too, and this is an example of girls being able to do it too, and it's not acceptable either way. The other thing that I'm also going to point out, at least in my opinion, is before we get to Romney's opinion, is Momo-kun. I was actually going to say her real name, but Momo-kun has made a statement in regards to this, a video statement. It has been taken down as of this point, but she basically blamed her odd behavior on ADHD.
Oh, Christ.
And I just have to come out and say, this is an actual problem with me when I go to conventions, guys, because as an active person who deals with ADHD on a regular basis, when I get bored and I occasionally see that shiny thing off in the distance, my first instinct is not necessarily to chase it, but instead grab my compatriot Romney's ass. Romney, your thoughts?
Way to pass the baton after shorting out my brain.
By the way, guys, for the record, this doesn't happen.
Yeah, honestly, Alex pretty much hit the nail on the head with his statement. The whole cosplay not equaling consent going both ways. And the fact that she's trying to blame it on ADHD, full disclosure, like, I don't have it, but I know I have friends who do have it. ADHD doesn't make you do this sort of thing.
No.
It's like when Roseanne tried to blame her tweet on Ambien. It's not just no. That's not an excuse at all. And honestly, good on the creator group for dropping her once enough, and good on the people who were willing to come forward, because again, that's the important thing. Like, they showed a lot of courage coming forward, explaining what happened, and so good on the people for coming forward. Good on.
It was not the Creators Guild that came forth first. It was actually the cons themselves that did, and said, we're so good on them too, because they basically took actions and said, we're not even trusting this. You're off the panel. If you're there, then we're going to escort you away.
Yeah. So good on the cosplayers who've unfortunately experienced these incidences. Good on them for coming forward and letting people know what's going on. Good on the Creators Guild for doing the right thing and severing those ties. And I mean, seriously, who blames this thing on ADHD? I mean, I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. I'm just like, what level? I mean, there are such things as logical gymnastics.
I don't know.
But even in terms of logical gymnastics, there's no way to make those.
At this point, EA blamed Zelda for Mass Effect Andromeda failing, not their own lack of competence or the fact that they had to move over to another engine. So I guess the sky's the limit on what you can actually blame.
But the thing is, at least EA is blaming another video game. That makes sense.
Okay, there's a little bit more logic there. I mean,
this would be like EA blaming the sun for Mass Effect Andromeda tanking. That is how they did. That is how insane this whole it's blaming it on ADHD. That is how insane this is. It's like someone blaming the fact that a game didn't do so well on the phase of the moon on the day it was released. That is just how backwards and stupid that sounds.
Well,
and so
let me just actually go to this point, because Alex, you could kind of attest to this, and Romney to an extent. Okay, I actively have ADHD. Okay, I don't treat it because there's no point. Like, nothing works. And I've gone to a con environment, and if anything, it doesn't encourage me to get more touchy-feely. It actually encourages me to go like this. Okay, it actually makes me go a little bit more introverted, where I'm not actually interacting with people, and I'm about as shy as anybody else. Okay, so at that point, like, I just don't see the argument here that because of your ADHD, you become well, for lack of a better term, sexual harassment freak. I just don't see your leap in logic here unless there's already something else in play.
Mm-hmm.
You want another good bit of context? In middle school, I was in like a couple special needs learning classes because I've had different learning disabilities to deal with. And, for those amount of those classes would have kids with ADHD in them. And remember, middle school, none of them ever felt the need to reach out and grab somebody's ass without permission. That's middle school we're talking about. When
at the very most
charged.
At the very most, my ADHD got me in trouble, but not in the sense of like I was grabbing people. I was mouthing off. Okay, because I think I've told this story on one of our Let's Plays, but eventually I got so bored one day that somebody said, okay, we're switching over to our math books. And my ADHD reaction was, ugh, like the loudest groan that I could put in the classroom, which ended me up in a 5-minute standoff with my teacher and eventually having to go to the principal's office. Okay, that's the kind of trouble ADHD creates. But even then, that's kind of me too. There's eventually something you have to consider here that, sure, you have ADHD, your own personality also comes into play here, which means it's a you thing. That's kind of the issue there too. Jiminy Christmas. It just blew my mind that this was what it got blamed on. I have ADHD and that's why I grope people. You know what? Now I'm actually worried about going to cons, guys. I'm actually worried because people are going to go, oh, you have ADHD? I don't want to be anywhere near you.
Yeah, just when mental problems couldn't be even more stigmatized. Great.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. So, congrats to the Creators Guild for stepping in on this one. Congrats to the cons. Congrats to the people who stepped out, because this is definitely behavior. And I'm glad it never got past the whole groping stage, because it could have gotten far worse. And to our knowledge, it hasn't. But this was definitely a step into that kind of behavior. And I'm glad it got stopped here and now so that Momo-kun can realize this isn't acceptable behavior.
Yeah, again, what is the first thing that any teacher at any kindergarten tells us? Keep your hands to yourself.
Pretty much. And I think we also need to amend. So you guys have already brought the New York Comic Con statement in there. Cosplay does not equal consent. I think we also need to amend it saying cosplayers does not equal consent.
Yeah.
So, that being in mind, final thoughts on this one, because there really isn't too much to go into. Congrats on the people who stepped up. Momo-kun, ADHD does not do that. At the very most, it makes you go and see shiny things. And there you go.
Yeah, the only way it would make you do that is if you're already a dangerous pervert. In which case, kindly leave us all alone. Sincerely, Society.
Yep, there you go. Moving on into the next story that we have tonight, which is interesting, but you guys will have to correct me on this. I swear we've covered this before, but it's official now. And that is, I believe we covered the reboot, but it didn't have a director at that point. And that is, people might remember back in 2014. That was when the reboot happened, right, Alex?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, 2014, we got the RoboCop reboot, which was not what anybody wanted. In fact, it was kind of silly compared to the old Verhoeven movies. But it looks like they've decided to do a RoboCop reboot again to try it out again. This one tackling I think the official title that they're going with right now, or at least the working title, is RoboCop Returns. But they now have a director for it, and that is Neil Blomkamp. Holy crap, this is actually a great decision. So for those who don't know Neil Blomkamp, he is the director of District 9, as well as the, correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, the 2015 hit Chappie.
Not exactly a hit, but I think you're right. Let me double check the date.
So District 9, Elysium, Chappie, those are the three films Blomkamp is most commonly known for.
And he's actually in circles as being one of the most discussed sci-fi directors right now because of his works on those movies.
Yep. And here's where things get even more interesting, because apparently the premise of RoboCop Returns is that this was initially a script written by the original writers of the original RoboCop, Ed Neumeyer and Michael Miner. This was their idea of an original sequel to the 1987 RoboCop film. And so both Neumeyer and Meyer are executive producing, with Justin Rhodes rewriting their script. And so it's very much another reboot, but it's a reboot that looks like it actually has the people behind the original films involved, and not just a candy-coated hollow shell that is RoboCop in name only.
Yeah, I'm actually fairly interested in this concept, not because of the failure of the 2014 reboot, but just because I haven't seen the original Verhoeven movies, and everybody has told me like RoboCop is a great property because of those. And they actually got mad at me because the only movie I've ever seen is the 2014 reimagining of RoboCop, which in retrospect, you're kind of right. It wasn't that good. But I'm actually happy that it's in the hands of Neil Blomkamp, where Blomkamp, even though he hasn't been given anything that, aside from Peter Jackson's original concept of District 9, he got that from Jackson. He's not really worked on adaptations. He's mostly tried to do newer projects, at least to my knowledge. Chappie is a newer project, and so was Elysium. So at that point, I'm not, and given how successful he's been on those sci-fi films, I like the idea of bringing him into a project like RoboCop.
Yeah, I especially like, because someone asked him on Twitter, literally saying, tell me it'll be rated R. Tell me the satire will be there. Tell me there will be huge effing exploding squibs. And he literally replied, there will be all these things.
And that's the appropriate response to that one, because that's what people loved about him. I don't know this because I haven't seen the Verhoeven movies, but I'm glad that he at least said, yeah. Because I think that was a complaint for you and me, Alex, when we saw the 2014 movie, right? It was PG-13, and we didn't understand, since the other ones have been R.
It was, it was the remake, the 2014 one was a very sanitized down RoboCop.
Yeah. And especially when I looked at it, it basically felt like it wanted to make a point, but it was doing things in such broad strokes. Whereas the original, I haven't seen it in its entirety, but I've seen bits and pieces to understand that, yeah, the original RoboCop actually has a lot of layers to its storytelling. It actually has a lot of symbolism, and it's an actual commentary on a lot of things, actually. It's pretty thematically deep. And I'm kind of in the same boat as you, Adam, where the reboot was wasn't my first exposure, because my first exposure to RoboCop was the cartoon series Alpha Command, which honestly is also which, after rewatching some episodes, is also a much more faithful take on RoboCop than the 2014 film was.
I think I might have actually watched that. I don't remember any specific episode plots, but I think I might have watched that too.
Yeah.
I don't remember. Yeah, for the life of me, I don't remember any of the plots. But yeah, that would be an introductory effort, because it did follow Alex Murphy.
Yeah, and so looking at it, although all we know so far is that it's not going to be tied to the reboot we got in 2014. It is going to be a new story. We don't know if it's going to be a continuation of the original film storyline with, there's no guarantee we're getting Peter Weller back as Alex Murphy, because he can't really play. I mean, he could if they wanted to basically if they wanted to do kind of the awkward CGI, the bottom part of Peter Weller's face onto someone else doing the suit, which, I mean, we have that with Iron Man already, so I mean, you could, because I'm sure he'd be willing to, but it's very much a case, the main reason why I'm excited is that Blomkamp, when you look at District 9, Elysium, and Chappie, they are hard sci-fi. They're basically doing what sci-fi is supposed to do. It's asking a question about society and then playing around trying to find those answers. With District 9, it was talking about the ways minority classes are treated in the world at large through the lens of an alien race being refugees in South Africa. With Elysium, especially, and this is kind of to the film's detriment, it was a very heavy-handed criticism of the healthcare debate, and even made comments about immigration when you consider the story being told in the frame of Elysium. And with Chappie, he kind of went back to being more highbrow in a case of, okay, let's explore the concept of artificial intelligence. So given the types of themes with a good RoboCop story of the whole, okay, when does someone stop being human and starts being more of a machine, which is the impetus of the original RoboCop, and to a lesser extent, that was what the original Ghost in the Shell was supposed to be about. It's very much a case where Blomkamp is the best person to handle this sort of thing. He's going to be the kind of person who is going to ask the question and then actually explore said question.
No, already given what he did with Chappie, I'm more than happy to hand him something this deep. Like I think I even made this clear. Like I wouldn't have cared if he got brought in for Ghost in the Shell, because that's definitely right up his alley. The other thing that I'm also going to compliment on this is, like, how many movies have we all like discussed and said Neil Blomkamp should be part of that, especially, you know, that it's sci-fi and he's had such a good success rate. I like, correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, you and I have discussed Alien. I know Predator has come up here, that he should take up those properties. Those are the ones that are coming to mind, and now he's getting his chance. He gets to take on an existing property and show us what he can do.
And I know when we did the group review of Chappie, I know I was the person who kept pushing, hey, do a gear, especially considering in Chappie that the main villain, played by Hugh Jackman, was piloting a frickin' Metal Gear.
Yes.
And given that in Elysium, you literally have these cyborg samurai in Elysium, like, it's very much a case where you can tell, okay, this is someone who is clearly a gamer, or at least an anime and sci-fi fan. It's very much a case of the passion is there. You can tell that he's willing to acknowledge his influences, but also turn them into interesting things. It's just, I'm excited.
I think this is a really great pick for it. Like we kind of made fun of it in our Facebook group, but that was just because of the fact that they were talking about whether it was going to be R-rated and whether or not it was going to have blood packs and all that stuff. But no, I love this pick. I think Neil Blomkamp should be given an old school sci-fi, and let's see what he can actually do with it, because we've been speculating on it forever on what he could do with an existing property. So kind of wrapping up on this one, Alex, what is your take?
Yeah, he is really a great pick for this. I mean, the only movie I've seen out of Blomkamp is Chappie. I haven't seen Elysium or District 9, but just knowing the way he did kind of frame downtown Johannesburg in Chappie, you know, not too different from, well, current dystopian Detroit. You know, a lot of poverty, a lot of crime, a lot of strife. He really is probably the perfect choice for this, not only from the fact that he is very comped with really hard sci-fi, but the fact that he's also very well tapped into a very similar environment to Detroit.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm actually very excited for this. But just because of time, we unfortunately need to move on to our last story. But congrats to Neil Blomkamp. We look forward to seeing the trailers for the new RoboCop. The final story that we have tonight, I find it funny that Romney brought up the fact of the Guild Wars writers done goofed, because that's literally what I said for this story. So Sony Pictures Entertainment endeavored to post a trailer for its limited release film Kali the Killer on YouTube, specifically to encourage viewers to watch the movie on Blu-ray. And instead, they released the movie. All of it. Not the trailer. All of it. On YouTube. To the masses.
I mean, we've complained about... I mean, a better way to look at it is like, well, I mean, I know that there are trailers that give away the whole movie, but I don't think that's what people are actually wanting with an actual trailer giving away the whole movie.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we already have comments in the Ars Technica article that we're reading from, but like another trailer that spoils the whole film. Yeah. So, oh my gosh, this is just a flub on
my favorite one is just like, what if this is still just a trailer and the full film is actually 130 hours long?
Oh, jeez. Oh man, that had better be worth the life that would waste on in my case. Holy crap, man. So yeah, I don't know what else we could add on this one other than Sony, you did it again. You done freaking goofed.
Oh no, I got to put on a little bit of tinfoil hat here and say, maybe this was just as planned. I mean, I know a lot of people kind of like want to argue or conspire that the whole debacle with the interview and the hacks was completely staged, but I don't think so in the case of the interview, but I think so. I'm almost willing to believe here this might have been a deliberate ploy to gain a little attention to this little movie that nobody would have paid attention to otherwise, by prematurely, quote unquote, leaking it onto YouTube for all the masses to see to drum up a little more publicity.
Yeah,
or that would be how they would that would likely be how they would spin it when asked about it.
Too.
I mean, I see your point of view, but I also just like in my head, I just want to envision, you released that file, Jerry? That's not the trailer, that's the film. Well, why was that on the USB drive, Harry? I don't know, Jerry, but you were supposed to pick the file on the right, and you picked the one on the left. You chose poorly.
Or alternately, it could have even just been an inter-office prank, which is like, well, I don't know, that was the one on the flash. Yeah, it could be just like, that was the one on the flash drive, and the one called Jerry just goes, Newman.
Newman. Or the other thing that comes to my mind is like, I saw a lot of people speculate on this one with the interview, and it turned out to be inaccurate. Is like apparently they were having such a bad relationship with Sony that Sony just wanted to be done. So somebody in Call You the Killer pissed them off, and they said, "Oh, here's the trailer." And then as soon as it got hit to YouTube and you had the full on movie, it's like, well, my job's done. I don't have to work with these a-holes ever again. I mean, that's a possibility too, but I think it's pretty safe to say this was probably an accident. At least on Sony's part. But I mean, it's not their first. Oh, Chivity Christmas. This is actually hilarious. Final thoughts on this one, though, because that's pretty much it. If they were going to release a trailer, and instead they released the entire damn movie.
Oops.
Yeah. I mean, I wish we could say that this was an elaborate stunt, but honestly, accidents happen. We've seen it before, especially in the games industry and in the film industry. I mean, Sony, I'm surprised Sony didn't immediately try to spin saying, oh no, this was a way to drum up publicity to get people to talk about it. But honestly, I think it really is just a case that maybe somebody labeled the files wrong, given that companies like Sony would have like a cloud server or something, and especially given that they use tools that upload a whole bunch of videos at once. They don't do it one at a time like we all have to do. So it could be...
It just makes you wonder, like, what was the first warning flag on Sony's end? Is like, so they're actually, let's just see the reaction on YouTube for what's happening. Why are we getting reviews? I thought we would get reaction videos. Why are we getting full on reviews? And then they look at the video and go, oh crap, that's not a trailer. That's like an hour and a half long.
Yeah. Or that's when they're just like, okay, let's take a look at the trailer's gone up. Why is this trailer an hour and a half long?
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Gee, Chris, this is an epic goof.
Release the 90-second trailer. 90-minute? No, 90 seconds.
Exactly. It was old Gerald in the trailer booth that day. Release the 90-second trailer. What we said? 90 minutes? That's a long trailer. No, 90 seconds, Gerald. Okay, I'll release the 90-minute. No.
Yeah.
So
I mean, honestly, though, I can see this taking up as an interesting strategy. Like, imagine, for the sake of argument, imagine if Disney decided, okay, we're going to make a 90-minute trailer for the next Star Wars film, where they just upload a completely different, like, where it's like, oh yeah, it's Star Wars, and then they just upload like a completely alternate version of the film.
Yeah.
I mean, I could see that working. Maybe using it as like, oh, this is the one that the true fans wanted. Like, and I could see them like specifically poking fun at the angry fanboys doing it that way. But the question is, would Disney really want to spend that much money?
Yep, exactly. So, all right. Well, final thoughts on this one, because I think that pretty much covers it all.
Or even better, it's literally just a 90-minute video of a actual trailer. So not the like video trailer. I mean, like literally just a camera pointed at a trailer that just has Star Wars Episode 9 painted on it. And it's just that is their trailer. It's literally showing footage of just a 90 minutes of a camera looking at a trailer that just says Star Wars Episode 9.
So you're basically saying that they clickbaited the hell out of this.
Yeah.
So Star Wars Episode 9 and put a big thing of boobs right on the thumbnail.
See, that reminds me, way back when The Force Awakens was announced and in production, and I can't remember where I found this image, but I think it was like on Imgur or something. It's like, look at this exclusive photo from the set of Star Wars of the next Star Wars movie, and it was just a green screen.
Yeah.
A green screen with a couple lights and a camera.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of reminds me of that Super Bowl ad for like one of the Avengers movies. It was like a Super Bowl ad. It's like, oh, featuring an extended look at the new Avengers, and it literally you just have Robert Downey Jr. like just staring at the camera, where it's just like it's an extended length of time where it's just the normal trailer, but then there's the extra minutes of him just staring at the camera doing the extended look.
Yeah, pretty much. All right, so let's go ahead and wrap things up for the evening. We've covered all the stories that we have, and so we'll go ahead and start things off with, if people want to be able to get a hold of us to not only check out our content, but also be able to get our opinions on the stories that we cover tonight, as well as stories we didn't necessarily cover. Alex, the Shadow Blazer, how do they do that for you?
Find me on YouTube. Shadow Blizzard 3000 is my channel, and I do anime-related content reviews and occasional Let's Plays. And on social media, follow me on Twitter at AlexJShort. I'm going to have a review up. I started it 2 weeks ago, then shit happened, and so I'm finally going to finish it this weekend. So yeah, my next review is going to be Magical Girl's Sight. Expect that on my channel real soon.
All right. And Stephen Romney of Studio Ghost Utah, how do people get a hold of you?
Well, you can always find me under my handle, Studio Ghost Utah. That is my handle both on YouTube and on Facebook. I try to upload to both. I haven't been uploading the past few weeks. I actually will be uploading a video in the near future explaining what the hell has been going on. I am also on Twitter at Romney Reviews, so if you want to send any suggestions or any comments on my stuff, that is probably the best way to get my attention instead of sending it to Adam. And I am also on Instagram under Romney Does Art, which I recently launched. For some of you who are following it, probably saw my photos from the dinosaur park. And as for this week's Romney's recommendation, I'm going to simply pose this question. Have you ever wanted a nice, quiet way to get the news that isn't filled with people screaming back and forth or people screaming at you or very obtrusive ads? Allow me to introduce to you the newspaper. It's not a joke. I recently subscribed to our local newspaper, the Salt Lake Tribune, and, well, processing the news through the Tribune is a lot more calming than trying to get it through television or through the internet. So, although we have a lot of listeners who listen to this outside of Utah, this week's Romney's recommendation is the Salt Lake Tribune. It is an independently run, locally operated newspaper. It's been running since the 1800s. It tries to provide an objective voice for our community. But I'm going to use that as an opportunity of, if there is a local paper in your city or your town, subscribe, show support, because these writers that are working at the local level work really hard. So that's this week's Romney's recommendation is newspapers. They don't scream at you.
They do. And wow, given the setup, I actually thought Romney was going to start aiming at me and Alex for a second there. It's like a bunch of random angry talking heads. I'm like, wow, we didn't know you felt that way, Romney. And actually, I'm very happy that you supported it, because one of my buddies who actually works on another podcast I do writes for it. So that actually helps support him too.
Well, yeah, a lot of people because people who don't know, we all went to, well, me and Adam went to, not Alex, we went to Salt Lake Community College. We both kind of got our starts in journalism. And so a number of our friends from that college have gone on to write for the Tribune, which is the other reason why I subscribe to it. And so, yeah, support your local reporters, because they are working really hard and often covering stories that, well, the larger media conglomerates choose to ignore. And sometimes you find some really fascinating stuff.
And sometimes they're better than them.
Oh, snap. Did I say that out loud? All right. And then if people want to be able to get a hold of me, the best way to be able to do so is on my Twitter, which is at Drac2326. You can leave your questions there as well as your opinions. I will get to them as soon as I am able to. As long as they're civil and they're constructive opinions, I can have that discussion with you guys. And I've actually had some really good and constructive discussions with a lot of you, and I really do appreciate that. And also, if you guys want to check out my YouTube content, which is under the same headline, Drac2326, you're actually on my channel right now. I do game reviews, Let's Plays, a bunch of other stuff. In fact, I just barely put up my recent review for the 2018 God of War. It's a little late, but you guys have my review ready to go, as I know a few of you have actually been asking for it. So that's available. And then if you guys want to support the podcast directly, here is the best way to be able to do so. We ask that you support the RSS feed, which is geekyweek.podomatic.com. or you can look us up on iTunes or Google Play for Android users. Look up GNRO Podcast or Geek News Reviews and Opinions Podcast. You'll be able to find it there, and you'll be supporting the RSS feed that way. You can also support the podcast via social media under the exact same tagline, Geeky NRO, on Facebook and Twitter. And you'll get up-to-the-minute information when we're going live, the stuff we'll be talking about, the stories that may not necessarily make it in there, and also some exclusive content that's going to be coming very soon to the podcast, but it's going to be RSS feed only. Kind of like the pre-show is YouTube only. So you guys have something unique on both sides that you guys can check out. And then finally, if you want to be able to support, if you want to be able to submit stories or give your feedback on the podcast, you can do so at geekyweek@gmail.com. And that's going to go ahead and do it for us this evening. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for your continued love and support of the podcast. We really do appreciate it. Thanks so much to my fellow panelists for being here and enjoying the controversial stories that we've had, as well as some of the good ones. And we'll, of course, be back next week for more Geek News, Reviews, and Opinions. So for me, for Alex, and for Romney, we will see you guys next time.